All right, you guys ready? Let's get this show on the road.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's do the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right, item number 2 on the agenda today is the minutes. I sent a copy out. I have copies in front of us. I will take a motion to accept the minutes as they are.
I will make that motion.
I'll second.
Karen and Karen, for the record. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Beautiful. Okay, item number 3, 4, 5, and 6 are all continuations of what we were going to do the last couple of weeks. I am, as chair, under the impression that we are not going to have discussions about any of those items, but I just wanted to confirm with everybody. First of all, do we have any interest in discussing the maps that we have drawn in the previous meetings for item number 3?
I maintain my position as has been stated.
Great. Okay, so
What about, can I just ask, what about, Matt suggested, I think at our last meeting, that we could perhaps approve them just for this year so that there could be clearer polling issues. We'd have 10 districts just for this year's election.
I'm not prepared to do that. I don't think it's necessary, and why that makes the job any easier, better, or more effective for the town.
You speak up because we can't hear a damn thing.
I maintain my position that I'm not prepared to go forward in light of what I've stated on the record already. That's it.
I don't.
Nothing further.
We received a information today from the Secretary of State's office, their attorney, and it says that, none of this is necessary. So I don't see the point.
Well, it says that we can legally, she says, do the things that Jim asked, except it doesn't mean we have to. And also, I don't think she's right when I read the statutes, honestly. So.
Well, I am not going to argue with the staff attorney from the Secretary of State's office,
okay.
And she has confirmed that I'm going to read it into the record. I can confirm at SOTS that Fairfield has 10 RTM districts, which previously comported with the General Assembly districts as 10 single districts prior to the most redistricting. The legislative body has not met to change the voting districts to align with the new Assembly districts, and your intent is to keep the same polling locations for now, which would create split voting districts for about 7 RTMs. While we do recommend aligning RTM districts with the Assembly districts, perhaps for the 2023-2024 cycles, you can currently have several polling locations with split Assembly districts, so as long as there are separate voter registries and people are provided with the correct ballot at such location. CGS 9-169A lays this out. The tabulators can handle up to something like 9 different ballots, so 2 separate ballots are not an issue for them. You are correct that the registers select the polling locations, so they would have to agree on the polling locations as laid out in CGS 9-169. It is my understanding that next year your legislative body will be redrawing the RTM districts to comport with the Assembly district lines pursuant to your charter. Accordingly, the split voting districts will only be in effect for this election cycle and will not exist in the 2023 or 2024 cycles. You also asked whether the split voting district polling locations would need to have separate moderators and separate tabulators in different rooms. Per CGS section 9-258, you will need 1 moderator per polling place, regardless of whether it is a split district polling place or a single district polling place, as the tabulators are able to handle up to 9 separate ballots. As none of the voting districts will be left with a polling location, the adjacent polling location statute is not applicable here, nor is a section of the statute which states that there needs to be separate rooms for voting. I do hope this assists in the matter. Aida Carini, staff attorney for the Connecticut Secretary of State. So for those reasons, I don't think that it's necessary to take any action at this particular moment.
I'd like to comment for the record that I can't believe that our town paid legal fees to ask for that opinion when it was only to justify recessing this committee. And also that it's
How
up
do you
to the
know that we
let me
paid-
just finish
how do
my
you
comment.
pay- how do you
Let me
know that we
finish
paid
my
for that?
comment,
Please,
okay?
please,
I didn't
please.
interrupt you when you read her thing. It's up to the registrars what they do. They, maybe in some, desperate situation, they can do it this way, but they can also decide to make it easier for everybody and clearer about voting. That's their prerogative. So whether, it's like saying we could have 50 kids in every classroom. Yeah, physically we probably could and legally, but it would not be good. So it's a decision they can make for what's best for the town. And as a side note, I don't think that would hold up in court, because I read the statutes today several times, and I think she's wrong. Just because it's the Secretary of State doesn't mean it's legally correct. But I hear you, you're not going to agree to that, so that's, that's your prerogative.
I'm not in a position to argue with a staff attorney from the Secretary of State's
Sure.
office.
Yes, you are.
Hal, please.
Hal, you need to.
No, there is no comments, none from, I will clear the room in 3 seconds if I hear another word out of anybody here. Okay, there is no engagement with anybody on the committee.
And it's not funny, Mr. Scheinberg, it really isn't. So you should really,
No, you can't engage with them either.
Facial
Okay,
expression.
I also want to just correct for the record what Connecticut General State Statutes 9-169F says. And that's not later than June 1st in the year after the first regular General Assembly election, following a reapportionment of the General Assembly, each municipal legislative body whose members are elected wholly or partially on the basis of geographical division of the municipality shall adopt a reapportionment plan for such legislative body. That means that the first regular election after the General Assembly reapportionment is November 2022.
23.
No, it's this November
This
2022. This makes the municipal reapportionment plan due June 1st, 2023.
Except that under our charter.
Following the charter and the RTM rules to regulate, that makes our deadline to get an ordinance to the committees in time for an appropriate adoption in March and April, or March/April, depending on whether or not we suspend rules again, 2023.
That's the outside limit. It's not what our charge
Correct.
said. It's the charge that you helped to write and voted for.
And you are correct, and I was voted under that, on that charge, given information that was incomplete, and turned out that there was flexibility there, and I went back.
That's not true, Pam. That's just not true. I'm sorry. There's no way that someone said you're supposed to have 10 districts. It's not in there, and they're not allowed to tell us how many districts.
No, I'm telling you that I voted in favor of pushing that
Oh, for the
thing in
cost.
charge, because I thought that the cost was there, and then I came to find out that it wasn't, and I went back and asked for it to be revised, and no one wanted to hear me. I was told to put my concerns on the record,
Which you did,
and I
yeah.
did.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why that happened.
Mhm.
That's it. That's the only reasoning. So I from the beginning never saw the reason to rush this. I still don't see the reason to rush this. If the registrar decides that they want to move the polling locations around, that's on them. They can move the polling locations around. That it has nothing to do with what we're doing right here. This is an election for the General Assembly. It has nothing to do with the RTM, which is what our ordinance is for. And that's what the charter says, procedures for RTM elections. The voting districts of the town, including the number of districts for election of the RTM members, shall established by an ordinance adopted by the RTM. Mm-hmm. That's what that means. You're right, it's the outside deadline. Mm-hmm. It is not necessary for us to get it done today, tomorrow, or yesterday.
I know that's true.
And the registrars can choose to do whatever they would like with the polling locations. We have nothing to do with that unless they can't agree. So it's apples and oranges that are getting mixed up into a big giant fruit salad and blown out of proportion.
Okay, so the apples and oranges that are getting mixed up is the Charter Revision Commission and redistricting. The only reason this stopped was because the Charter Commission might have 9 districts, and that's just not our issue. Our issue is to do it promptly after the new assembly districts are drawn. We knew that. We all agreed. We agreed on 10 districts at the second meeting. We spent time doing it, and it was ridiculous to just stop it. There was no reason. So whether or not we have more time theoretically is irrelevant, because we all agreed to do this. We agreed to 10 districts. We created the 10 districts. And it's really, I think, shirking the responsibility to not finish it.
Well,
But whatever we both say is not gonna change the reality
No,
of
it's
what we have.
not, and respectfully, I still maintain the position that the registrars do not have to change the polling locations. That is their prerogative if they choose to do that. I maintain the position that they may keep the polling locations exactly where they are for 2022. And that way, in case that there is a change for 2023, we are only doing it once. That is the reason for the pause. That is it, nothing more. If there wasn't a chance, an outside chance that this might change, then I would keep going. But what is the harm in waiting 3-4 more weeks?
Because we were almost done. Anyway, there's no point in bickering back and forth.
And then we would have to come back and redraw another map in November. Sure. And we have moved the polling locations twice on people. I just don't think that that's fair to the voter. I'm sorry. Doing this isn't fair to the voter, and saying they can all vote in the same place is just to take you off the hook. They could vote the same place, I suppose, if she's even right. But it's confusing. We voted.
How is it confusing?
We voted there in 2012.
Explain how it's confusing.
Because if there's multiple places in one, like say 3 districts voting in one location, in one room, in the same, the same tabulator.
Sure.
There are going to be mistakes.
How is that confusing to the voter, though? Explain your comment that's confusing.
Because they're not going to know which line to go to. It's just...
Well, that's up to the registrar's office to properly train people and direct people to go to the proper...
Whatever. There's no reason that we're talking about it.
Okay, really. Now there's no reason. Before it was,
well, there is
the voter.
Right, there is. I agree. I believe there's confusion, but we're just going to bicker back and forth.
There'd be more confusion sending people to 2 different polling locations year after year, I believe. If it's organized correctly, it's pretty simple. Set up a table, one list here, one list there. If you're on that list, here's your ballot. If you're not on that list...
In Stratford, they had a big problem, right? That could happen here.
It could happen here if you don't properly set it up. It's got to be set up properly. It's not that hard.
Yeah.
Procedures and policies, pretty simple.
Listen, it was been done this way before. It was done that way in 2012.
But the point is, we had agreed to do this. I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead, finish. I don't want to interrupt.
Do you want to take a minute to compose yourself?
Oh, no, but you can do that if you'd like.
No.
All right, enough, please.
I'm not laughing.
Please,
You are laughing.
enough.
I laughed at one thing, yes.
All right,
But
please.
don't say that. You're as angry as I am.
All right.
I'm actually
Let's
fine.
move on, please. Let's move on. So items 3, 4, 5, and 6 no longer on the table since we can't get item 3. Then with the consent of the committee, I will ask for item number 7, which will be public comment. I will ask people to line up and take a spot at the podium. I am limiting comments to 4 minutes, so everybody gets a chance, and then I will go to anybody who's left on the web. So if you please, there's a microphone on the podium, so please keep your hands away from the podium and just speak there. And again, there's no addressing, it's just comments. There's no addressing individual people here on the committee or anything else. It's just your personal comments, and I'll remind the committee that there's no talking back to the public. So, yes, I'm going to.
If you could have,
so you can.
that'll make my life
much easier.
Thank you.
Yep, so if you would sign in, please, as you come up, so Kim will have it for the record for the minutes. So please, step up, take your spots. Who'd like to go first? Please name you, and for the record, please, your name and your address as well, so everybody who's listening knows who you are as well. I would appreciate that.
Good evening. My name is Stephen Scheinberg, 15 Flax Road. I'm a citizen of Fairfield, and as you know, I'm also the chairman of the Fairfield Democratic Party, representing 14,000 Democrats in town. This redistricting committee was formed with a charge by the RTM to redistrict municipal lines. This committee met several times with the the registrar and drew lines for 10 districts. The registrar adjusted those lines at the request of Republican members. At one time, all 4 members of this committee agreed on 10 districts. 2 weeks ago, the Republicans on this committee adjourned the meeting without agreeing to the maps of 10 districts that they previously agreed on. Without agreement, this committee will be in violation of the charge of the RTM. Republicans claim that they want voters in November to vote on proposed charter changes on the number of districts. However, the number of districts is not in the charter, has never been in the charter, and should not be in the charter. Republicans think they need an odd number, 27, of representatives per district so that there will be no tied votes. There was a tie vote a few years ago, and a Democrat crossed the aisle to support the motion. So a tie vote would force both parties to work across the aisle and compromise for the best interests of the people of Fairfield. 27 members backs you into 9 districts, which is what the Republicans want. 9 districts will mean much larger districts with less representation per district. Republicans claim that they do not want to redistrict now with new polling locations, which will result next year in additional changes to polling locations. That assumes that the charter changes that will be proposed will be approved. They may not be approved. And again, number of districts is not in the charter, and it should not be in the charter. If you redistrict now per the charge of the RTM, you will have 10 polling locations, and they will not change next year. Now there are 2 town committees working concurrently, the Charter Revision Commission and this committee, and there is creating a conflict of interest, especially with you, Ms. Iacona, represented on both committees. That is clearly a conflict of interest. Please put the interests of all the voters, the people of Fairfield, first. You redistrict now, you will not have to redistrict because 9 districts will not be approved by the voters in November. Please represent the people and not your shrinking Republican Party representation in town. There cannot be a repeat of the confusion of 2012, which was thrown out of court. I implore you now to finish the work of this committee tonight. It is not too late
30 seconds.
for the RTM to pass the ordinance on April 25th and fulfill your charge. You can work on a compromise. Politics is the art of compromise, and that compromise would be to agree tonight on 10 districts and possibly 3 representatives per district. Thank you.
Cindy Wapnitzky, 41 Valley.
You cover sign it.
Hi, Fairfield. Okay, I just want to piggyback on something that Steve said. I have a problem with, on this committee, having a person, I don't want to put this so that I'm attacking, but I feel that if you're on the Charter Revision Committee and you're on the Redistricting Committee, that is a conflict of interest. And all the other things that Steve mentioned are all my concerns as well, but I find that to be something very difficult to swallow. I imagine that there's no legal problem with that. I'm not a lawyer, but there is definitely an ethical problem if you are on both committees. I cannot understand that, and that's what I have to say.
Please fill out your name and address on the piece of paper, please.
Right down there, Cindy.
Next.
My name is Beth Johnston Tricosis, 480 Burr Street. I've been in Fairfield about 30 years. This is a really unpleasant environment here tonight, and I am shaking, which is really ridiculous at my age. I had the privilege of working with the League of Women Voters on a redistricting series. And we spent 6 months, and we had a lot of speakers and authors, and we worked with the Fairfield Museum, we worked with Fairfield U, we worked with the Fairfield Library. It was wonderful. And all the time, I'm thinking, Fairfield, not my town, all these people, not in my town. And here I come on March, 29th, for the vote, and 2 members, it's like picking up your ball and going home after it was almost completed. And I don't understand how you can be voted in now under this charter, but say, well, there might be another charter, so I'm not going to act. It makes no sense to me. And the way you talk about voters being so confused, maybe people know different voters than I know. The voters I know are not confused. If you give them clear direction, they'll show up to vote wherever. I don't get this. I'm doing it for the voter. It just doesn't ring true to me. Maybe there's more history here than I know. It seemed like the committee was working well together. 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans, nonpartisan. This is a league's dream. What happened? I mean, I hear that there's a lot of acrimony. I read some of the things in the letters to the editors and things, and I don't recognize my town. It is terrible. 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats, you're almost done. You've drawn maps. We have an election coming up. We've already blown the April 25th deadline, right, for almost getting close to that. I'm disappointed. I don't recognize this. I'm very sad about it. Yep.
Please fill out the paper for me.
Guess I'll sign in later. My name's Judy Ewing, 98 Pasco Hill Terrace in Fairfield. I've lived there for over 50 years now. I've been involved in town government for over 50 years, and I've mostly enjoyed it. And I know a lot of people from the other party as well, and we've always gotten along very well. And I'm very disturbed about the things I'm hearing and reading about in the paper. This is not the town that I love right now. I think when you run for public office and you win, you take a vote, you take an oath of office, that you will do what's best for the town, that you will attend to business. When this issue first came up, if you felt it was not appropriate to come up at this time, that's the time you should have said, we're not going to do this now. You've already met several times. You already talked about a map, but not with 10 districts. I think the public is getting confused, quite frankly. I know I'm a bit confused too. The charter says that the RTM shall do this, and that means that that's your responsibility. When I was first involved, I served on 2 redistricting committees in the 70s and 80s, and it was pleasant, but because it was up to the first selectman to choose the committees, and Mr. Sullivan was in office at the time, we had 1 more Democrat than Republicans on the committees. And so who gets to choose? Who gets to vote? Who gets to decide? The Democrats. And I didn't think that was good. Now we have a bipartisan committee that should have an agreement, and the agreement should be what's best for this town. And I was actually very interested that we did do this now, because I know there were issues a couple of years ago when we couldn't decide what was going on, and it all ended up in court. It wasn't in 2015 that it got straightened out. And that meant that many people were confused in going into a polling place, and half of the people had to go here and half there because of their assembly district changes. And I really think that now is the time to settle this, and then we can go into the next election with all this being settled and behind us. This is your responsibility. And you took an oath that you would do this sort of thing, and if you didn't want to serve on this committee, back when it was formed, and I can't honestly remember when that was, you should have said, no, I don't want to do this. I can't serve on this committee. I can't, in good conscience, plan what's best for the town of Fairfield, and to also accommodate the registrar of voters. And I think this is what this is about, because they do have the responsibility to make sure everybody gets to the location they belong in, and to get to the proper table or part of the gymatorium, or whatever they call it these days, that they will then vote at the right place and their vote will count. The charter says the responsibility is with the RTM, and I really think that's where it belongs, because you are the people that are most able to do this and to also have concern about which districts, how the districts are chosen, and where the
30
boundaries are.
seconds.
So that's pretty much what I have to say, but I say get on with it. You've already decided on 10 districts. That's fine. If that's your final decision, and you want to leave the rest to somebody else, I say don't leave it to somebody else. Do it yourself.
Who's next?
Barbara Thumb, 45 Sturgis Road, Fairfield. I just want to say I support everything the previous speakers have spoken to. And the hostility here is not what a meeting, a political meeting should be. You represent us. We are not aliens, and the atmosphere, when you run for office, it's just like when you go to war. You might get shot, and you don't take it personally. That's all I can see here is somebody doesn't like what I'm thinking. Well, you're not the dictators. You're our representatives.
Can you
Please sign the paper. Thank you. Next? Nobody else? You are entitled, sir. Make sure you fill out the paperwork, okay?
You got it. Matt Wagner, Registrar of Voters. I live in the building here, so. I have a little bit of a different approach, I think, than the other people. I've tried really hard during this process to be of service to you, to not make any kind of public statements that say you have to do this or you have to do that, or you should do this even, right? Like, it's going to be very light touch. I think it matters very little in terms of how many districts there are, how many representatives you have. I mean, it's an interesting political question, but not one I felt like I needed to, from my office, get involved in. I'll say most towns that have local legislative bodies by district have different lines in the state years and the local years, right? Like, that's something that happens a lot of places. The voters there do well with it. When we've had to change polling places, our voters have done well with it. We have summer closures for this school or that school, right? You know, this problem that we experience when we have multiple ballots in a room, it's something, I went back through our sort of paperwork, I found it happened several other times other than just 2012 over the years, right? Someone says, well, someone got the wrong ballot in this place. How did that happen? Something happens, you know, 30,000 times in a row. We have 100 poll workers repeating this task over and over again all day. There may be one error, there may be two errors, but sometimes you have elections that come down to that few votes, and that's something that we really want to try and avoid. What I would ask the committee to do, right, I know there's this political question about what the Charter Revision Commission is going to do. I sat in on the last meeting. It didn't sound like the group was really close to a consensus on the question. I know that the deadline for doing redistricting and the deadline for the Charter Revision to go to the Board of Selectmen is very similar timeline-wise. If that question can be resolved by the Charter Revision Commission, whether to set a number of districts or to not set a number of districts, whatever that group decides, I hope that this group will be willing to come back once that question is settled and put a plan on the table, right? We could use the one we have, we could draw another number of districts if that's what the group wants. My impression over time has been that Republican RTM members want fewer districts and fewer members. Democratic members want more districts and more members, right? That seems to be the basic outline of what people are asking for. I think that there's a consensus to be had, like there was 10 years ago, when the group said, look, the Democrats want 10 districts, the Republicans want a reduction in members, let's do that together. Let's give each side something they want, so everyone can go home feeling like they got something out of the process, right? If the Charter Revision Commission says we want this number of districts, and we're gonna have a reduction in members, maybe you pass a plan that has that number of districts, but doesn't decrease the members. And then later on, if the Charter Revision passes, you reduce the members. If it doesn't, you have a higher number. I just think that you could be creative about what you do to not slam the door on the process. So I hope that you do get some clarity from Charter Revision about what's going to happen there, and that you're willing to come back and try and get a final plan together before that cost comes out. That's what I would ask. You know, a little bit different, I think, than the rest of the speakers, but happy to sort of provide any services to you, any advice. You know, I really want to see this process work. So thank you very much.
Anybody else? Is there anybody out on the web that wants to speak? I'm going to try, but I can't make any promises. Raise your hand or put something in the chat for me. Okay, seeing none. I want to thank everybody for coming. Thank you for your comments. I appreciate it. Is there anything else from the committee?
Yes, I just
Al,
want to
may I
read.
say something? I didn't write in the chat fast enough for you. It's Jill
I
Vergara.
couldn't see it. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jill.
That's okay. I'm sorry. Jill Vergara, 271 Old Post Road. I'm an RTM representative. I think not establishing these new voting districts will be administratively burdensome. It's been shown to do that and increase the chance of administrative mistakes. Look at what happened in Stratford just recently. We're going to expose ourselves to at least 7 more polling places to have mixed assembly districts. And ballots were thrown out in that election and people were disenfranchised. I do not want to have that happen in Fairfield, and neither did Mr. Ellsworthy, the Republican Registrar of Voters, who spoke very recently at a March budget meeting, stating, in quotes, he's hoping that redistricting will be settled as soon as possible. And that was in March, because he stated that what happened in 2012 should never happen again. And he acknowledged the chaos that was caused by not having these voting districts drawn. I think that you're sacrificing this election for the prospect of the next election, and I don't think it's proper. We committed to this getting done by the RTM in December. We wrote this charge. Representative Iacono was instrumental in this charge. We weren't even going to write a charge. It was her insistence, her language given to us. The state law creates a baseline. It might not compel us to act, but both our town charter and the RTM redistricting committee's charge direct the committee to act now. The redistricting charge was voted on and approved by Representative Iacono in December 2021, and it specifically commits to execute the responsibilities under the charter provision to effectuate the prompt and professional implementation of a redistricting ordinance. Representative Iacono is a member of the Charter Review Commission, as well as the RTM Special Legislative Management Committee and the RTM's Redistricting Committee. She was well aware of the Charter Revision Commission's work and the potential for far-reaching structural change that could impact voting districts when she voted on and approved the charge as an SLMC member. She herself insisted on giving the Redistricting Committee a charge, architected that charge, and disabled the RTM Redistricting Committee from meeting until the charge was approved. Because we formed this committee well in advance. I think it was in November, when the Redistricting Committee finally did meet over a month after it was formed. the committee unanimously voted to adopt a 10-district plan. Again, Representative Iacono was on the Charter Review Committee and was privy to all considerations. She was well aware that everything is and was on the table, including a restructuring and renumbering of districts. This pivot right now and pretending like we didn't know about these issues before, it is not appropriate. What is in the best interests of our voters and to ensure that no one is disenfranchised by having massive confusion at the voting at the polls and having to administer a very complicated ballot situation is to go through with these maps right now. It is embarrassing. It's taken other towns 3 hours to accomplish this.
Thank you. Anybody else? Seeing none, is there any comments from the committee?
Yes, I will just reiterate what I said last meeting, which is that if you wanted to work on a 9-district map concurrently, I was more than willing to do that work. And yes, as soon as there's some type of signaling from the Charter Commission, yes, more than willing to come back and do the work. No, I don't know if it's a misconception or, you know, a misunderstanding or what, but there was never any halt of the redistricting committee to wait until after the election to take any action. It was to find out what is going on at charter reform. And again, I just want to reiterate that I went back to the chairwoman of the SLMC and asked her to revisit this whole thing based on the new information that I had, and I was refused. So that's what happened. It's not like this happened in a vacuum. I didn't make a secret of it. I've been very open about it. I went on record as I was told to do. I'm in authority. I had to take my direction from the chairman of that committee, which I did. I wanted to go back and revisit it. Had I been allowed to revisit it, I would have said that I didn't want to do this anymore and I wanted to hold off. But I didn't have that opportunity to do so, and I put it on the record the way that I was asked. So, you know, I just want to tell everybody, I served on the last redistricting committee, and it was a wonderful experience. It was really nice. It was completely bipartisan. No, the DTC didn't get involved. The RTC didn't get involved. Everyone trusted one another. Everyone was open. Everyone was forthcoming. And, you know, 2 people asked to take a pause. I don't have a crystal ball. I had absolutely no idea where that charter reform was going. And one legitimately at the time had nothing to do with the other. And now when it percolated up that this was a discussion point, and that's it. I've raised it over and over again as a discussion point. Gave us pause. That's it. I'm sorry the timing is what it is. I wish this was up in November or in January and it was put to bed and it wasn't interfering with our decision here to take a pause. But that's the timing of it. And by the way, anybody tuning into these Charter Revision Commission meetings would see me trying to move it along. I've been the one trying to move this along, stay longer and trying to move it along. So, you know, it wasn't my proposal for the 9-3 pitch. That came from our attorney listening to this whole conversation at Charter. So, you know, I'm just the intermediary. That's it. My past history demonstrates that I am able to accomplish this in a fair and appropriate manner, and I stand by my record on that. Some of the best work I've ever done in a bipartisan fashion. And, you know, it saddens me that there was a call to arms by the DTC to get involved in what should be nonpartisan work. I didn't get on the phone and call the RTC and say, hey, get involved in this. I was hoping that all of this could be a 2-week pause, a 3-week pause. I don't know, again, where charter reform is going with it. But it is what it is. I'm very sincere when I tell you, you know, I am trying to do the right thing to the best of my ability and with all the information I have at hand. And people that know me know that that's who I am. What you see is what you get. And I'm not afraid to own that. And I'm an open book on this. I've been very honest about it from the beginning, all of it. And, you know, as I stated last meeting, I never understood why it was on the first organizational meeting of the RTM But it is what it is, and we are where we are, but I have absolutely no intention of not meeting the outside deadline of this. And, you know, whatever has to happen for the, like I said, with the registers, that's their purview, and I respect the decisions that they make there. You know, and the register is right, there's something to be said. Perhaps there do need to be different assembly districts for, you know, state elections versus municipal. You know, I don't pretend to have any of the answers on that. But I know who I am. I know I'm sincere. I know I did good, honest work before, and I know that this committee, if it will tune out the outside noise, can do good work again. So, you know, as soon as we get a little bit more feedback on things, I'm more than willing to come back to the table. That's not an issue.
Anybody else? And that is the, you know, just before we end, that is the one question that I have for everybody sitting at this table is when we are able to come back, is everybody willing to come back and pick this up where we left off or start over as we have to do it? Are the three of you, because I know I am, and are the three of you willing to do it? That'd be great, because I think we did good work, and I think we have a foundation, and if the foundation has to change, then it will, and if it doesn't, we have a foundation to build on from here. I think we did really good work, and I'm really happy. I'm really proud of the maps that we drew, and I think we can continue to do that. So I want to thank you for the work that you guys did, and you know, for you know, showing up and doing what had to be done. So as the chairman, I'd like to say thank you to all of you for what we did, and I look forward to working with you again.
Yeah, and it could be for a 2-week pause, it could be a 3-week pause, it could be a month pause. We don't know. As soon as
We'll find out as soon as we get some answers, and then you know, once we have some.
When's the next charter?
The Charter Reform Commission meets again on Thursday. Then I think there's a meeting. We schedule a special meeting. We did it early before the RTM meeting. We generally meet on Thursday, but I do know that we have to call for a public hearing, and the Board of Selectmen has to hold one, and I think that's sometime in the end of May. And then it can, if there are changes there, it can come back to the commission. I think there's a 60-day period there.
What's the deadline to get to the vote?
Wherever that 60-day threshold.
November,
yeah,
whatever.
and I don't know what that is, to be honest with you. I asked our attorney to explain it to me, and he told me on the phone, and I didn't do a clear job writing it down. But there's a time frame in there. And then once that's handed off to the Board of Selectmen, the Charter Review Commission has nothing to do with it anymore. You know, unless they come back and want us to work on a piece of it, once that 60-day period's done, it's gone.
It's over.
Yeah, there's.
All right, so I guess then we'll take a hiatus and see what happens, and come back when we know what we're doing, and move forward from there. If there's nothing else, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make the motion.
Second?
I'll second.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you.